Congratulations on your new Stitcher critter. This one is the sheep. Let's look at the instructions. Thread a length of yarn through your stitching tool. Pull yarn through holes until your critter is as fluffy as you like. Okay, so first let's pull this bottom off. This part's a little bit tricky, and you can ask a grown-up for help if you need to. I'm just gonna pull on this there, and it popped the lid open a little bit. The boxes are made tightly so that nothing falls out. All right, so let's take the sheep out. This one's made out of maple, and it's nice and smooth. We're gonna have a good time putting its woolly coat on. Next, I'm gonna pull the yarn out of the box. And there's my stitching tool attached to the yarn with the rubber band. There's a nice big hole in the stitching tool, and it's not really sharp, but you should still be careful with it. Take the rubber band off your yarn and try to do this carefully because it will want to get tangled up a little bit. All right, so let's just take one length of yarn, maybe about as long as your arm. If it's too long, it's gonna get tangled up and maybe wanna make knots, but if it's too short, you're gonna have to cut new pieces all the time, so you can get an idea of how long you like it. Snip the yarn or ask a grown-up to cut it for you. And now you need to put it through the hole in your stitching tool, and again, this can be a little bit tricky. I just use the tip of the scissors to push it through the hole. If you need help with this, ask for help. This is probably the hardest part of this whole project. Pull quite a bit of yarn through your stitching tool so that it doesn't come out of the hole. And we can get started. You can pick any hole you want to start your stitching. I'm just gonna pop it right through here. Now pull it until it's almost to the end, and then just hold that end down with your thumb or your other finger. And do it again. You don't want to pull the yarn really tight. It should be snug against the wood, but you don't want it so tight that it's like stretching the yarn. Just go nice and gently, and you can move each stitch with your fingers if you want, and then pull it until it's just touching the wood. And that way you can cover more area, and you can get everything exactly where you want it. I want it nice and fluffy up around the sheep's face. I'm going to pick another hole and start putting some stitches through that hole now. Yeah, just like that. You can go in through the front side, whoops. You can go in through the front side, or you can poke your stitching tool up through the back side, whichever you like. Now, say you accidentally go through the wrong hole and you don't like how it looks. That's okay, just pull the yarn back up through, flip it over, and you can poke your stitching tool back through the back side. And there, all fixed. Now you can make your stitch again wherever you want. You can see I let go of the first end of the yarn now, because now that there's a few stitches made, it won't pull out anymore. So I'm just going to keep on stitching. In one hole, out the other hole, keeping my yarn not too tight. And when you get to the end of your piece of yarn, just poke it into a hole. You don't want it hanging out too much, too long. I'm going to poke it up through this hole too. And when I put my new stitches in, they'll hold that old piece of yarn in. So I'm going to pull out another length of yarn about as long as my arm. Carefully cut that. And I'm going to thread the needle again. You could maybe even use a pencil. The tip of a pencil would probably poke this into your stitching tool. Sometimes when you're pulling the yarn through, this might happen. That's because yarn is made up of several strands of really fine threads all wrapped up together. That's okay. I'm just going to poke the extra bits in there and give it a good pull, and there it all comes through just like it should. And once again, I'm going to be careful to hold that loose end of the yarn until I've made a few stitches. You can just go ahead and keep on stitching your critter. Whenever you get tired or it's not fun anymore, go ahead and set it down and take a break. This might take you lots of days to do if you just like working on it a little at a time, or maybe you want to listen to an audio book and stitch the whole thing in one go. It's totally up to you. So here we are, we're just about finished. I really like how woolly my sheep is. I've gone in and out of lots of holes, but see there's a spot here on the back that is kind of bare. So I'm just gonna move my needle over there and put in a few more stitches here just to cover up this spot. As you're working on your critter, you might wanna flip it over and work on both sides to make sure that you don't have any empty spots. Now to tie off my end, I'm wiggling my tool underneath the stitches right along the wood, and I'm gonna pull the end through those stitches. There's the very end of the yarn. If you've got a really long piece left over, you can cut it off so it's close to the body. And I'm just gonna poke these loose ends into one of the holes. And it should hold in place really nicely. If you ever find an end that's unraveling later on when you're playing with your critter, you can just use your tool again and poke the end in. Now you can use a brush and rough it up a little bit if you want it looking even more woolly. And you can play with your critter. If you ever get tired of it and want to change the color, you could take some scissors and cut all of his wool off, and it'll be ready brand new to have a new coat of whatever kind of wool you like. Have fun!